Welcome to the Word Says Forge with Matthew J. Coran. Today we're going to talk about who the villain really is. Is it the guy who spins around in his chair, laughing maniacally and petting a cat? Or is there something more than that? When we think of a villain, it's interesting because when you go through like critics' reviews of fictional stories, whether it be in movies or fiction books, just anything in pop culture, it's interesting. A lot of times they'll base the quality of the story off of the villain and not the hero. The hero plays an important role, don't get me wrong, but the villain plays a uniquely important role that it seems to strike a chord with people more than anything else. And why is that? And I'll get to that, but first let's talk about what a villain is not. A villain is not evil for evil's sake. He doesn't spin around in his chair laughing, petting his cat as he just takes over the world, just reveling in how evil he is. He is someone, or she is someone who has a fallen nature to them. Because no one is just evil, right? No one is just pure bad. Because everyone's made in the image of God. So everyone has even the smallest bit of good in them. Doesn't matter how horrible they act, what they do, they could do the most despicable things you can think of, they still have a little bit of good in them. Because they're human. And we all have a little bit of bad in us. We all have a fallen nature about us. And so when we see the villain in the story, we're seeing our own fallen nature dramatized. We're seeing the battle between good and evil unfold in a very dramatic way. Whether it's the hero versus the villain, or everyone with a little bit of bad and good in them, and there's some that are slightly better than others. Like you see this in more popular shows like Game of Thrones. Like, there's no quote-unquote villain, but there are people that you're like, this guy kind of sucks, but he also does some good. But this guy sucks even more. And but then there's more clear-cut examples, like in Star Wars, like Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, where not to say that Luke Skywalker is 100% a good person, or Darth Vader 100% bad, like I was saying, but it's a lot more of a clear distinction. And so, what makes Darth Vader such a memorable villain? Because everyone knows who Darth Vader is, right? Everyone knows him to be a villain. So what makes him villainous? Is it his evil force powers that choke people out? No. You could argue just as easily that those could be used for good, and he's not the only one who has them. And not all the Star Wars villains are nearly as memorable. You could argue maybe the Emperor, but there's plenty of other ones too. Is it his cyborg-like body? No, because even Luke had a cyborg arm, which there's some symbolism there, but we're not going to get into that. It goes beyond any of the particular traits that the villain has. It's who he is at his core. And what do we see with Vader? That he's mostly machine, but he has a little bit of man in him. Like, beneath all of the powers, all of the machinery that's keeping him alive, all of the facade of his mask, his evil-looking lightsaber, all of that, there's a living man inside of there. And we see that come out in various scenes, whether it's announcing to Luke that he's his father and wanting to rule as father and son, or the time where he literally gave his life to save Luke's. You see a living man in there. And the whole point of the villain is to strengthen the hero, right? Because if Luke didn't have a Darth Vader to go up against, he wouldn't have had to become strong. If it wasn't for any trial, we never grow. We go to the gym to lift weights. Why do we do that? It's hard. Because it makes us stronger. Right? We're literally built for trials. We're built to overcome them. We're built to become anti-fragile. And that's what the villain offers the hero, is anti-fragility. The villain, in a lot of cases, is a contrast to the hero and the certain characteristics that they have. Right? Like, Luke was someone who put a lot of value on family and someone who, wanted to, he's someone who desired freedom. Whereas Darth Vader was someone who, in his own way, had his value in family, but it was more of a possession. Right? He wanted to possess things. And it was that, ironically, is what made him a machine in the first place. If you look at the prequels, his desire to possess status and to possess people led him to become a machine that carried out the will of his master. And it wasn't until he embraced what love actually was that he became more of a living man again. Right? Because in that moment where he saved his son, he saw what love really was in that moment. Maybe not explicitly in those words was he thinking that, but true love in that instance, it sacrifices. A machine doesn't know how to sacrifice for the sake of others purely. And so even in villains, there's something that's redeemable. And that's what sticks with people. It's not any of the gimmicks or quirks. It helps to make them stand out and make them more memorable. But what really resonates with people, what gets people to relate to that villain, is in that they have similar struggles with sin, and they're just as redeemable. Because in the end, the villain in your own life is yourself. It's your own sin that you battle against. It's your own weaknesses and your own tendency to act like machines. And you're also the hero that overcomes them. So think about that the next time you watch a movie or read a story. How can I relate to this villain? What sin do they represent that I can overcome in my own life? What weaknesses do they have that I share? How are some of the ways that I can become that villain if I don't watch out, if I'm not vigilant? So in seeing how the villain works in stories and in your own life, you see how you can also become the hero and how heroes rise up in these stories. All right, take care and God bless.